she wandered into their picnic, tiny paws on the blanket, sniffing everything. And then she did something unexpected, she only took the apples. The day was warm and sunny, perfect for an afternoon picnic. Birds chirped in the surrounding trees while a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Families spread blankets on the soft grass, setting out baskets full of sandwiches, fruits, and drinks. Children laughed, chasing each other between blankets, while parents unpacked food with relaxed smiles. At the edge of the picnic area, partially hidden by bushes, a small bear cub appeared. Its fur shimmered in the sunlight, and tiny paws pressed into the soft earth as it cautiously approached the picnic. The cub paused, sniffing the air, ears twitching with curiosity. Its nose quivered at the scent of apples, bread, and sandwiches. No one noticed it at first, the sounds of laughter and chatter masked the soft movements of the cub. But soon, a child's squeal of delight at spotting a butterfly coincided with the cub stepping out from behind a bush. Its dark eyes, wide and innocent, scanned the colorful blanket spread on the grass. The cub sniffed the air again, taking tentative steps forward. The family closest to the cub froze, unsure of what to do. Their voices were calm, whispering among themselves, and they remained seated, knowing sudden movements could startle the animal. The cub approached a picnic basket filled with fruit. Nose twitching, it leaned forward, sniffed, and pawed gently at the apples spilling over the top. It squeaked softly, a small, almost musical sound, filled with curiosity but no aggression. Parents exchanged glances, relief evident on their faces. Harris, a nearby wildlife observer who happened to be in the park, quietly stepped closer, hands raised slightly to remain non-threatening. He whispered to the family, "Just stay calm, don't make sudden movements, let her choose." The cub pawed at one apple, sniffing it carefully, then nudged it slightly. It squeaked again and, with surprising precision, selected one apple from the basket and began nibbling gently. The family watched silently, awe written on their faces. Children held their breath, eyes wide with excitement. The cub's small, delicate movements were both playful and careful. It sniffed other items in the basket, bread, sandwiches, and grapes, but each time it turned away, returning to the apples. Harris noted the cub's behavior. She's learning, she knows what she wants, she's curious but cautious. The mother bear, unseen but close in the nearby woods, had likely instructed her cub with silent cues long before she left the nest. The cub finished nibbling the apple, squeaked softly, and looked toward the family. It paused, ears flicking, then returned to paw at a second apple, as if making sure it was still the right choice. The family remained perfectly still, understanding the delicate balance between observation and interference. A slight breeze lifted the blankets, causing a small ripple. The cub froze, ears twitching, and glanced toward the sound. Harris whispered again, "Easy, stay calm, she's just curious." Slowly, the cub resumed nibbling, returning to its chosen apples. The children's eyes were filled with wonder. "She's so cute," whispered one. Another whispered, "Look at her tiny paws." Harris smiled, observing the natural curiosity and cautious behavior of the cub. The cub, confident but still cautious, began moving around the picnic area, occasionally sniffing and pawing lightly at the blankets. Each time it approached non-apple items, it quickly returned to the apples, clearly selective in its choice. The family remained silent, captivated. The cub's playful curiosity, combined with its gentle and precise selection of food, created a magical, peaceful moment, a rare encounter between humans and wildlife that felt cinematic and real. Then, a slight noise came from behind the family. A frisbee rolled across the grass, startling the cub. It jumped back a few steps, squeaked in alarm, and froze. Harris quietly raised his hand. "It's okay, nothing's coming near you, just stay calm." The cub paused, sniffed the air, and then cautiously returned to the apple basket. It selected a third apple, rolling it gently with its paw before nibbling again. The family exhaled in relief, witnessing the cub's gentle and careful behavior firsthand. From the edge of the nearby woods, the mother bear's massive silhouette was visible. She watched intently, but without interference. The cub's independence and selectivity were evident. It had learned that humans could be calm, and curiosity could be expressed safely. As the sun shone warmly over the picnic area, the cub continued nibbling the apples, squeaking softly, tail flicking in contentment. The family, children and adults alike, remained perfectly still, immersed in the unique moment of trust and observation. The cub, now confident, pawed at the last apple in the basket, and carefully carried it a few steps away, settling in the grass to enjoy its snack. Harris whispered quietly, "She's learning. Nature teaches patience, observation, and trust in every interaction." And in that serene moment, the cub had completed its first lesson of the day. Curiosity could be satisfied gently, choices could be deliberate, and humans could be observed without fear, a perfect example of trust and calm in the wild. The cub has only taken apples, ignoring all the other food. Why do you think it made that choice, and what would you have done if you were there? The cub finished nibbling the first apple and paused, ears twitching as it surveyed the picnic. It was clear that it was no longer just curious, it was beginning to understand the rhythm of this new environment. The sun was warmer now, casting gentle shadows across the blankets and baskets. Children's laughter continued at a distance, careful not to disturb the small visitor. Harris observed quietly, kneeling behind a low bush. He knew the importance of letting the cub explore on its own terms. Any sudden movement, loud noise, or gesture could trigger fear or aggression. The family remained perfectly still, mesmerized by the little cub's confidence and selective behavior. The cub sniffed around the basket again, pausing occasionally to glance at the family. Its dark eyes were alert but not frightened. It pawed gently at a second apple, then rolled it slightly across the blanket, testing its texture and smell. The cub squeaked softly, a high-pitched, musical sound that resonated with the peaceful environment. From a distance, a frisbee rolled close to the cub, startling it. It jumped back slightly, tail flicking rapidly, ears flattened for a brief moment. But rather than fleeing entirely, it crouched low, sniffing the air cautiously. Harris whispered, "Easy, stay calm, nothing's coming near you." The cub paused, then returned to the apples, seemingly reassured by the calm presence of humans and the silent watchfulness of its mother in the woods. The children leaned closer, holding their breath, eyes wide. One whispered, "Look, it's so careful." Another added, "It didn't even touch the sandwiches." Harris smiled inwardly. The cub's behavior was fascinating, a natural instinct balanced with cautious exploration and precise decision-making. The mother bear remained at the edge of the forest, massive and still. Her eyes tracked every movement, but she made no move to intervene. Harris knew this was crucial. The cub had to learn independence while feeling the security of its mother's presence. The cub picked up a second apple and carried it a few steps away, placing it on the grass before beginning to nibble. Its small paws clutched the fruit with surprising dexterity. The family sat quietly, barely daring to breathe, watching the delicate interspecies interaction unfold in real time. As the cub explored further, it discovered a small pile of leaves near the edge of the blanket. It pawed and rolled them, occasionally glancing toward the family. Its actions were playful but cautious, and it seemed to be learning how to manipulate its environment without disturbing the humans. Harris noted the subtle cues. The cub's body language, relaxed shoulders, soft squeaks, gentle pawing, indicated curiosity tempered by caution. Its interactions with the apples were methodical, almost deliberate, as if it were testing and learning at the same time. A gentle breeze swept across the picnic area, rustling leaves and causing the blankets to ripple. The cub froze for a moment, ears twitching, then slowly resumed pawing at the apples. Harris murmured softly, "See? She's learning that nothing here is threatening, just slow and careful exploration." The cub's confidence grew with each passing moment. It carefully rolled an apple toward the shade of a nearby tree, then sat back on its haunches to nibble. The kid in the family pointed quietly, whispering, "It's so cute, it's like it knows what it wants." Indeed, the cub had learned focus. While it investigated other items on the blanket, nothing drew its attention like the apples. It tested the edges of a sandwich and sniffed a cluster of grapes but returned quickly to the apples, squeaking softly in apparent satisfaction. The mother bear shifted slightly in the forest, massive head tilting, eyes never leaving her cub. Harris knew that this silent monitoring was crucial. The cub was learning autonomy, but under the watchful eye of its mother, the lessons of caution, patience, and selection were reinforced naturally. Suddenly, a squirrel darted across the grass near the picnic. The cub's ears twitched, and it let out a short squeak of curiosity. For a brief moment, it paused its apple snacking to watch the squirrel, tail flicking lightly. The children giggled softly, excited by the cub's playful attention. Harris remained calm, letting the cub decide whether to investigate further or return to the apples. After a moment, the cub returned to its apple, rolling it gently and nibbling carefully. The squirrel disappeared into the trees, leaving the cub content and focused. The family exhaled quietly, amazed at the cub's ability to navigate distraction without fear or aggression. Harris whispered to the family, "Notice how it chooses, observes, and tests. It's learning more than just taste. It's learning trust, environment, and control. Every movement is intentional." The cub explored a few more inches of the blanket, sniffing other items but always returning to the apples. Each time it came back, it squeaked softly, tail flicking, eyes bright. Its behavior demonstrated a remarkable balance between curiosity and caution, instinct tempered by observation and experience. The family watched in quiet awe. Children pointed at the cub's small paws, its delicate handling of the apples, and the way it paused occasionally to assess the humans' reactions. Harris smiled, recognizing the rare, peaceful harmony unfolding, humans, wildlife, and environment coexisting in a moment of trust and calm. As the sun moved higher, shadows shifted, and the cub's movements slowed slightly. It had eaten one apple completely and was now nibbling another with meticulous care. The mother bear in the forest shifted again, a subtle signal that the cub was safe but still observed. Harris exhaled quietly. The cub had passed its first real test of exploration, navigating distractions, assessing threats, and making deliberate choices. Its focus on the apples demonstrated instinct, preference, and emerging independence. And just as the afternoon seemed to settle into calm, a faint noise arose, the distant hum of another family approaching the picnic area. The cub paused mid-nibble, ears twitching. Harris whispered, "Stay calm, she'll decide what to do." The cub glanced toward the sound, then back at its apples, tail flicking uncertainly. The picnic's peace was about to be tested once again. Would the cub retreat? Would it defend its apples? Or would curiosity and trust guide its next move? A new family approaches the picnic area. How will the cub react? Will it stay with its apples or retreat into the woods? The cub froze mid-bite, the apple still clutched between its tiny paws. Its ears twitched, rotating like little radar dishes as the faint murmur of approaching voices drifted across the meadow. The once quiet atmosphere of the picnic shifted, tension slid through the air like a ripple across still water. Harris felt it immediately. His back stiffened as he crouched lower behind the bush, raising a hand in a silent signal for the family to remain motionless. The children obeyed instinctively, holding their breath as they watched the cub's body stiffen. The new voices grew clearer, laughter, footsteps, and the faint rustle of grocery bags. Another family, unaware of the delicate encounter already unfolding, was heading toward the picnic clearing. The cub's nose twitched furiously. It lifted its head, the half-eaten apple rolling from its paws onto the blanket. Wide, dark eyes scanned the clearing. It let out a small squeak, not playful this time, but sharp and uncertain. Harris whispered under his breath, "Easy now, decide carefully." He knew the cub's next choice mattered: retreat, freeze, or defend. The mother bear, still at the edge of the forest, shifted her massive shoulders. Her ears angled forward, her presence heavier now. Though she remained in the shadows, her gaze burned into the meadow, waiting to see how her cub would handle this new disturbance. The cub took a step backward, placing one paw on the grass as though ready to retreat. Its little tail flicked nervously, ears still swiveling toward the laughter approaching. For a tense heartbeat, it seemed like the encounter was over, that the cub would abandon the apples and dart back to its mother's side. But then something remarkable happened. The cub glanced at the apples again. Its nose twitched, and it let out a softer squeak. Slowly, it crouched back onto the blanket and reclaimed the fruit it had dropped. With delicate determination, it resumed nibbling, though its eyes never left the direction of the approaching family. The children behind Harris widened their eyes. One whispered, "It's brave," another breathed, "It didn't run away." Harris allowed a small, tight smile. The cub had chosen to hold its ground, guided by hunger and curiosity rather than fear. It was still cautious, every muscle alert, but it had made its decision. The voices grew louder now, and soon the new family appeared at the far side of the meadow. They were carrying a cooler and blankets, chattering cheerfully, unaware of what waited just ahead. The children in Harris's group shifted nervously, eyes darting from the cub to the newcomers. Harris raised a finger to his lips, urging absolute silence. He knew the moment the other family spotted the cub, things could unravel quickly. Panic or loud reactions might provoke the mother bear. The cub paused its nibbling again, ears pinned. It gave a quick glance toward the forest, where its mother remained a shadowed sentinel. The signal was subtle but clear: "I'm here. You're not alone." Encouraged, the cub rolled the apple closer to its chest, squeaked softly, and continued eating. Harris whispered almost inaudibly, "She's teaching it." This is how cubs learn courage, with safety just behind them. The new family drew closer, chatting as they searched for a place to spread their blanket. Their laughter carried across the clearing. Harris's heart rate spiked. They were seconds from noticing the cub. The children behind him clutched at their mother's arm, torn between awe and fear. The mother's eyes darted nervously to Harris. He gave her a reassuring nod but kept his gaze locked on the cub. At last, the inevitable happened. One of the newcomers, a teenage boy, glanced up and froze mid-step. His voice cracked slightly as he called to the others, guys, there's a bear." The clearing shifted in an instant. The new family froze, eyes wide, scanning until they spotted the cub. Gasps rippled through the group. Someone dropped a bag, the crinkle of plastic startlingly loud in the tense silence. The cub jumped at the sound, ears flicking back. It clutched the apple tighter, squeaking in alarm. Its little body trembled, but instead of bolting, it shuffled backward a few steps, eyes darting toward the forest. From the shadows, the mother bear rose slightly, her head emerging into the light for the first time. The sight was commanding, a towering presence, silent but undeniable. The meadow held its breath. The newcomers stiffened in shock, their voices catching. "Oh my God, is that the mother?" Harris moved swiftly, raising a calming hand toward them. He whispered firmly but clearly, "Stay calm. Don't shout. Don't move toward her." His tone cut through the panic like a steady anchor. The cub glanced back at its mother, then returned its gaze to the apples. It squeaked again, almost as if announcing, "I'm okay, I've got this." Slowly, it bent its head and resumed nibbling, though its tiny body trembled with the effort of balancing instinct and determination. The family that had arrived stood frozen, uncertain whether to stay or retreat. Harris knew the wrong move could trigger chaos. He lowered his voice even further, "Back away slowly if you need to. Don't run. She's watching how you behave." The cub finished the apple in its paws and licked its little snout, tail flicking with renewed energy. It nudged another apple closer, squeaking softly. Its decision was astonishingly clear. Despite the new tension, it wanted to continue its exploration, not retreat. The meadow remained silent except for the sound of the cub crunching fruit. The newcomers obeyed Harris's quiet instructions, holding still, their fear shifting into awe as they realized they were witnessing something few people ever see. A cub testing its independence in the presence of two human families, its mother still watching over it. Harris's group exhaled collectively, but he didn't relax. He knew the calm was fragile, the balance delicate. The mother bear's shadow loomed at the tree-line, her patience finite. Then, just as things seemed to settle, the youngest child in the newcomer family tugged on her father's sleeve and whispered, a little too loudly, "Daddy, can I give it an apple?" The question shattered the fragile calm. The cub's ears perked at the sound, and the mother bear's massive head tilted sharply, eyes flashing in the sunlight. Harris's heart pounded. He raised his hand quickly, whispering in an urgent but calm tone, "No sudden movements. Don't approach it. Stay where you are." But the cub had already heard. Its head lifted, eyes fixed on the little girl holding an apple in her hand. It squeaked, curiosity ignited, and took a single, hesitant step in her direction. The meadow fell silent again. The cub was making a choice, one that could either deepen the trust of the encounter or push it toward danger. The little girl wants to offer her apple, and the cub has noticed. Should she? What would you have done in that moment? The meadow hung in absolute stillness, as though even the wind dared not move. The little girl's fingers tightened around the apple, its skin gleaming red in the afternoon sun. The cub's black eyes locked onto it with unblinking intensity. Harris's pulse quickened. He leaned forward, whispering sharply yet quietly, "Don't move. Don't go closer." His words were for the girl's father, whose hand hovered just above her shoulder in hesitation. The cub squeaked softly, tilting its head. One small paw edged forward, the grass shifting beneath its pads. Its nose twitched furiously, catching the irresistible sweetness of the apple. Behind it, the mother bear lifted her head higher, a faint rumble vibrating low in her chest, not loud, not aggressive, but a reminder of her presence. The girl's eyes were wide, unafraid, innocence radiating from her gaze. She whispered, barely audible, "It looks hungry." The cub shuffled closer, apple core still clutched in one paw. With each step, Harris's body tensed further. He knew how quickly curiosity could turn to chaos. The mother bear would tolerate her cub's exploration, but the second she perceived a threat from the humans, the scene could change in an instant. "Hold your ground," Harris murmured. "Don't step forward. Just let it decide." The girl's father finally placed a steadying hand on her arm. His voice trembled as he whispered back, "We can't let her." But before he could finish, the cub stopped only a few feet away from them, still on the edge of the blanket. Its nose twitched. Its tiny jaws dropped open, letting out another squeak that was half question, half demand. The girl lowered her apple slightly, as though the cub had asked politely. Harris's group held their breath. The mother bear's ears flicked, her weight shifting. Every fiber of the meadow seemed charged with invisible tension, balancing on the edge of something that could either end in wonder or fear. The cub crouched suddenly, then bounced forward with a clumsy leap, not aggressive, but playful. Its paws hit the grass, and in one swift motion, it snatched the apple straight from the girl's small hands. Gasps erupted from both families. The cub tumbled back a few steps, the apple firmly between its teeth. Its tiny body shook with effort, and then it plopped onto its haunches, gnawing enthusiastically. The girl's eyes widened, her shock turning instantly into a delighted smile. She whispered, "It took mine." Her father let out a shaky laugh of relief, his fear melting into incredulous awe. Harris, though, remained tense. He kept his gaze on the tree line. The mother bear had seen it all. She hadn't charged, hadn't growled. But her eyes burned, fixed on the humans. Her cub had crossed a boundary, and she was measuring whether they had crossed one too. The cub gnawed happily, the red apple quickly shrinking under its sharp little teeth. Juice dribbled down its chin, glistening in the sunlight. The sound of crunching filled the meadow, strangely loud against the silence of two families frozen in disbelief. Harris whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "She's letting it happen. She trusts her cub enough to learn." The cub glanced up mid-bite, catching the little girl's gaze again. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, an innocent exchange, built on nothing but curiosity and trust. The girl giggled softly, covering her mouth so as not to disturb the fragile peace. But then, as the cub finished the last bite of her apple, it dropped the core onto the blanket. Its nose lifted again. And it caught another scent. The cooler. The newcomer's cooler, still resting beside the father's leg, half-zipped and filled with sandwiches, fruit, and more apples. The cub squeaked, stood on wobbly legs, and took a step toward it. Harris's eyes narrowed. He knew what came next. The cub had crossed from curiosity into determination. Once it associated human food with opportunity, the situation could spiral. "Close the cooler." Slowly, Harris whispered. His voice was steady but urgent. The father blinked at him, confused. "But no. Do it calmly. Don't let it get in there." The man swallowed hard, then bent slightly, moving with exaggerated slowness. His hand hovered over the zipper. But the cub was faster. With a quick squeak, it waddled closer and pawed at the cooler flap, little claws scratching the fabric. The sound was sharp. Too sharp. The mother bear growled, louder this time, her deep rumble rolling like thunder across the clearing. Both families froze instantly, eyes snapping to the tree lean. The cub ignored it, too fixated on the cooler. It pawed harder, nose pressing against the zipper. Harris's pulse hammered in his ears. If the cooler opened, the cub wouldn't stop at apples. The mother bear might assume her cub was being blocked or threatened, and the peaceful balance could shatter in a heartbeat. Harris whispered quickly, "Pull it back. Don't let the cub open it, gently, gently." The father's trembling fingers closed the zipper just as the cub hooked its paw over the flap. There was a brief tug-of-war, absurdly quiet but terrifying in its stakes. The cub squeaked in frustration, teeth bared not in aggression, but sheer determination. Its small body pulled, but the man held firm. From the tree lean, the mother bear stepped forward. Her massive paw pressed into the earth with a sound that silenced everything else. Gasps rippled through the group. Both families stiffened. The cub froze mid-pull, ears flicking back at the heavy sound. Its little head turned, eyes locking onto its mother. The mother bear's gaze was unblinking, her posture commanding. The message was unmistakable. The cub let go. The cooler flap fell shut with a soft thump. The cub squeaked again, this time lower, almost sheepish, and backed away a step. Harris exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. His shoulders lowered slightly, but his eyes never left the mother bear. She had intervened without moving farther, her control absolute. The cub, now chastised, shuffled back toward the picnic blanket. Its nose twitched as if searching for another apple, but its energy had shifted. It plopped down on the grass, rolling briefly before flopping onto its side. A tired squeak escaped its mouth. The little girl whispered, she told it no. Harris nodded slowly. That's exactly what happened. But even as relief spread through the group, Harris knew this wasn't over. The cub was still restless, and the scent of human food was strong. The balance held, but it wavered with every breath. And then, before anyone could relax fully, a new sound cracked through the meadow, the sharp click of a camera shutter. Everyone's heads whipped toward the source. One of the teenagers from the newcomer family had pulled out a camera, its lens glinting in the sun. He snapped another picture, the sound echoing unnaturally loud. The cub's ears shot upright. The mother bear's head snapped in their direction. Harris's blood ran cold. The camera clicked, and the mother bear turned her head sharply. Was this the moment her patience would finally end? The sound of the camera shutter sliced through the meadow like a crack of thunder. It was small, mechanical, but in that moment it was everything. The cub flinched, squeaking in surprise, its apple-stained mouth pausing mid-chew. The mother bear's head swiveled instantly, her eyes locking onto the source with a glare that froze the air. Harris's heart plummeted. He raised a hand in warning. Stop. Put it down. Now. His voice was sharp but whispered, a desperate attempt to prevent the moment from unraveling. The teenage boy, grinning nervously, didn't yet understand the gravity of his action. It's just a photo, he muttered, lifting the camera again. Don't. Harris barked louder this time, his voice echoing across the meadow. The boy froze mid-motion, eyes darting between Harris and the mother bear. She hadn't moved yet, but the sound of her breath was audible even from the picnic blanket, heavy, deliberate, and laced with warning. The cub looked between its mother and the boy, confused. It gave another small squeak, pawing at the grass as if unsure whether to continue its play or retreat. The girl whispered, "She's angry," her voice trembled now, the innocence from before tinged with fear. Harris kept his gaze on the boy, speaking low and firm. You don't flash metal eyes at a mother bear. You don't make noises she doesn't know. To her, that's a threat. A weapon. The father of the newcomer family finally grabbed his son's wrist, yanking the camera down. His voice was hushed but furious. Are you trying to get us all killed? The boy's grin evaporated. His face drained of color. But it was too late. The sound had broken the meadow's fragile balance. The mother bear rumbled again, louder, her chest vibrating with a guttural warning. The cub startled and scampered a few feet back toward her, apple core bouncing across the grass. She didn't move forward yet, but her weight shifted onto her front paws. Every human in the clearing understood what that meant. She's about to charge, one of the mothers whispered, panic rising in her voice. Harris raised both hands subtly, palms facing the group. His voice was steady, calm, commanding. No sudden moves. No screams. Sit still. Let her see we're not a danger. The girl's father swallowed hard, his arms circling protectively around his daughter. The newcomer family shifted nervously, eyes darting between the cub and its mother. The teenager's camera trembled in his lap, now forgotten. The cub let out another squeak, pawing at the ground as if asking its mother for guidance. She huffed, the sound sharp, her jaw snapping once in the air. The cub immediately stopped moving, sitting down on its haunches like an obedient child. She told it to stay, Harris murmured, watching with awe even as his pulse raced. The mother bear took a slow step forward. The earth seemed to quake beneath her weight. Her massive head swung from side to side, scanning the group, eyes lingering on the father clutching the cooler. The humans froze, every breath shallow, the world reduced to the bear's every motion. Then the cub made a mistake. Drawn by the memory of the sweet apple, it toddled back toward the picnic blanket. Not directly toward the cooler this time, but toward the little girl who had held out the fruit before. The girl's eyes widened, torn between delight and fear. She whispered, "It wants another one." Her father tightened his grip. No, no. But before he could stop her, the girl reached into the basket beside her and pulled out another apple. Harris's eyes snapped wide. Don't feed it. Not again. Too late. The cub bounced happily forward, squeaking with excitement. Its tiny paws smacked against the blanket as it closed the distance. The girl held the apple out timidly, her small hand trembling but sincere. The cub snatched it in a blur, juice spraying as it bit down immediately. This time it didn't retreat, it stayed on the blanket, chewing noisily, only inches away from the child. Gasps rippled through both families. Harris felt the ground drop out beneath him. The mother bear saw it all. Her eyes narrowed, her ears pinned back. The cub was too close now, not just near the humans but among them. To her, this was no longer playful curiosity, it was risk. Harris's stomach tightened. He whispered, "Everyone stay still. Don't touch the cub. Don't move the child." The mother bear huffed again, louder, the sound rolling like a drumbeat. The cub froze mid-chew, its small body trembling slightly under her command. Then, for the first time, the mother bear stepped fully into the meadow. Her massive frame broke free of the shadows, sunlight catching the sheen of her fur. She was enormous, towering, a living wall of muscle and instinct. The air thickened with the raw presence of her authority. The humans stiffened in terror. The little girl clutched her knees, the apple core forgotten in the cub's paws. Harris's voice was a whisper barely audible, but steady, "She's coming for her cub." The cub squeaked softly, dropping the half-eaten apple. It backed a step toward its mother, ears lowered, eyes darting between the humans and the towering figure approaching. The meadow held its breath. And then? The mother bear stopped. Only a few feet from the blanket, she froze, her head lowering. Her eyes, dark and unblinking, locked on the little girl. For a moment, predator and child were bound in a silence deeper than fear. No one dared move. The cub squeaked again, softly, almost apologetically. The mother bear blinked slowly. She huffed once more, but this time it was softer, almost resigned. Then, in a move no one expected, she turned her head slightly, nudging her cub backward with a massive paw. The cub resisted for a moment, but another low rumble from her chest was enough. It stumbled back toward her side. Relief trickled across the humans, but Harris knew better. The bear hadn't left yet. She had tolerated their presence, tolerated the apple, but she wasn't finished with them. And then, just as the tension began to ease, a new problem surfaced. From the far side of the meadow came voices. Loud, laughing, oblivious. Another group of hikers, entering the clearing with no idea what they were walking into. Harris's stomach dropped. Another group of hikers was about to stumble right into the clearing. Would their noise undo the fragile trust that had barely held until now? The laughter drifted across the meadow like a jarring intrusion, breaking the tense quiet that had settled between the bears and the families. It was the kind of laughter born of light-hearted adventure, careless and free. But here, in the fragile balance of this clearing, it was a crack of lightning in dry grass. Harris's blood turned cold. No. Not now. His whisper was harsh, his eyes locked on the tree-line where the voices grew louder. The mother bear's head jerked toward the sound, ears pricking, her massive body stiffening as she turned slightly to face the disturbance. The cub whimpered, pressing close against her leg. The two families by the picnic blanket held their breath. The little girl, wide-eyed, clutched her father's arm. "Are more people coming?" she whispered. Harris nodded grimly. "And they don't know what they're walking into." From the shadows beyond the meadow, 4 hikers emerged, 2 men, 2 women, all in bright jackets, backpacks slung casually over their shoulders. They were mid-conversation, one of the men gesturing animatedly with his trekking pole. Their laughter rolled across the field, completely oblivious to the silent tableau they were about to interrupt. The cub squeaked again, tiny ears flicking nervously. The mother bear rumbled low in her chest, a warning sound that vibrated through the ground itself. The newcomers froze. Finally, they saw what they had walked into. One of the women gasped, hand flying to her mouth. The man with the trekking pole stopped mid-gesture, arms suspended in the air as if his body had locked. The other 2 stood rooted, eyes wide, breathing shallow. For a moment, the meadow was carved in 2 halves, the bears on one side, the picnic families on the other, and the new hikers caught dumbstruck at the edge. Harris's voice sliced through the air, calm but commanding. "Stay where you are. Don't move." The newcomer's eyes darted toward him, bewildered. One of the men whispered hoarsely, "Is that a—" "Yes," Harris snapped quietly. "It's a mother bear. And her cub. Don't make a sound. Don't move closer." The newcomers froze in place, every ounce of color draining from their faces. The mother bear's eyes swept from the blanket to the hikers, calculating, uncertain. Her cub squeaked again and tried to toddle forward, but she nudged it back with her paw. "She's caught between us now," Harris muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His mind raced. A bear divided in attention was unpredictable, and unpredictability meant danger. The girl tugged at her father's sleeve, whispering in a trembling voice. Is she mad at us, or them? Her father swallowed. Both. The cub, perhaps overwhelmed by the new tension, dropped what was left of the apple and gave a high-pitched squeak. It stumbled clumsily in the direction of the newcomers. Every heart in the meadow stopped. The mother bear roared. It wasn't the deafening, earth-shattering roar of an attack, but a thunderous command. The cub froze mid-step, its small body quaking, and scrambled back to her side as if scolded. The sound reverberated across the meadow, bouncing off the trees, sending birds exploding into the sky. The newcomers stumbled backward instinctively, one of the women stifling a scream. The man with the trekking pole dropped it, the clatter of metal on rock slicing through the already fragile silence. The mother bear's head snapped toward the noise. Her lips curled just enough to expose the pale flash of her teeth. She's going to charge, whispered the boy with the camera, his voice trembling now with the realization of how wrong he had been. Harris raised his voice just enough for everyone, both families and the newcomers. Nobody move. Not an inch. You breathe, you blink, you wait. She'll decide. The newcomers were pale as stone. The man who had dropped his pole slowly crouched, as if to retrieve it, but Harris's bark cut through the air. Leave it. The man froze, sweat dripping from his temple. The mother bear shifted forward one step. The ground trembled beneath her massive weight. Her cub clung to her leg, squeaking pitifully, its apple adventure long forgotten. The little girl clutched her father tighter. Daddy, she's coming closer. Her father pressed her head into his chest, shielding her eyes. His knuckles were white as he held her. The mother bear's gaze swept again between the two human groups, the picnickers frozen on the blanket, the hikers frozen at the tree lean. For long, terrifying seconds, she simply stood there, the meadow trembling with her breath. Then something shifted. The cub sneezed. A small, almost comical sound, squeaky and harmless. It startled itself, stumbling backward with a soft squeak. The tension cracked. The mother bear huffed sharply, not the deep warning rumble of before, but a shorter, softer sound. She nudged the cub gently, her massive paw dwarfing its tiny frame. The cub squeaked again, more subdued this time, and pressed against her side. She turned. Slowly. Deliberately. Step by step, she began guiding her cub away from the humans, back toward the trees where she had first emerged. The meadow held its breath. Not a soul moved. Not a sound dared break the fragile mercy they had been granted. The cub glanced back once, a sliver of apple juice still staining its fur around the mouth. Its eyes, wide and curious, met the little girl's across the distance. For the briefest moment, they shared a gaze of innocence, one that belonged not to predator and prey, but to two children of different worlds who had simply wanted the same thing, something sweet, something simple. Then the cub squeaked softly and turned to follow its mother. The massive bear led the way back toward the tree lean, her body shielding the cub from all behind her. Each step was a warning and a gift. I am leaving, but do not follow. The newcomers sagged in relief, shoulders collapsing, but no one dared celebrate. Not yet. The mother bear paused once at the edge of the woods. She turned her head, eyes sweeping the meadow one last time. A single deep huff escaped her, a sound that could have meant threat, or farewell, or something in between. Then she was gone. The cub toddled after her into the shadows, its tiny squeaks fading with distance. The trees swallowed them both, and the meadow fell into silence. No one spoke. Not until the birds slowly began to return, their cautious chirps filling the air again, did the spell break. The girl's father exhaled shakily, clutching his daughter tight. "It's over," he whispered. But Harris knew better. It wasn't over. Not yet. Because when the mother bear disappeared, she hadn't taken the tension with her. She had left something behind, a lesson, a warning, and a choice. And the people in that meadow would never look at apples, or bears, or silence the same way again. The mother bear led her cub back into the trees, but had this encounter changed her trust forever? Would she come back to the meadow, or avoid it for good? When the last trace of fur disappeared into the tree-line, the meadow collapsed into a stunned stillness. No one moved. No one breathed too deeply, as though even their lungs might draw the bears back. Then, all at once, the tension broke. The girl's father dropped to his knees, pulling his daughter into his arms with a shuddering sob. She clung to him tightly, her small voice muffled in his shirt. "She looked right at me, Daddy. She looked at me." The boy with the camera finally lowered it, his hands trembling so badly he almost dropped the device. He muttered, half in awe, half in regret, "I got it all. I think I got everything," his voice cracked. "But, should I have?" The newcomers at the tree-line stumbled backward, away from the meadow as if distance itself could shield them. One of the women sat down abruptly on a rock, hands pressed against her face. The man who had dropped his trekking pole still stared at the ground where it lay, as if it were a loaded weapon. Harris didn't sit. He didn't crumble. His eyes were still locked on the shadows where the mother bear had vanished. He knew too well what had just happened. The bear hadn't left because they were safe. She had left because she had chosen mercy. And mercy was a fragile thing, unpredictable, conditional, not to be mistaken for forgiveness. He finally turned toward the families. "Is everyone okay?" His voice was low, but steady. The father nodded, clutching his daughter close. The mother pressed her lips together, eyes shining with tears, and gave a small nod too. The boy with the camera didn't answer, still staring at his footage as if it were burning in his hands. The newcomers spoke all at once, shaken voices, fragments of sentences. "Never seen. Thought it was coming straight for us. What if she'd?" Harris raised a hand. The meadow fell silent again. He crouched near the abandoned apple cores and paw prints. The cub's tiny claw marks scratched into the dirt like hieroglyphs. He touched one lightly with his fingertip. "This isn't the end," he said quietly. "That cub found something it liked here. Something sweet. And cubs don't forget." The little girl tilted her head, confused. "You mean, she'll come back?" Harris looked at her with grave eyes. "Most likely. Not tomorrow, maybe not this week. But the next time she smells apples? Or hears people out here again? She'll remember." The boy with the camera finally looked up. His voice was hoarse. "But if she comes back, she'll be bigger?" Harris nodded once. "And hungrier." The words rippled through the group like a chill. Suddenly, the apple cores on the ground didn't seem innocent anymore. They were like bait left behind. One of the newcomers whispered, "We have to tell people. The park, the rangers. Somebody." Harris's jaw tightened. He knew how these stories ended when they reached officials. Bears that grew too comfortable around humans didn't get second chances. The rangers didn't wait to see if a cub just wanted apples. They acted before tragedy could strike. And that usually meant removal or worse. The little girl's father seemed to realize the same thing. His voice broke as he asked, they'd put her down, wouldn't they? No one answered. The little girl, still hugging her father, frowned. But she didn't hurt us. She just wanted apples. That's not bad. Her innocence hung in the air, heavy and piercing. Harris stood, his shadow stretching long in the fading light. She didn't hurt us this time. But we can't count on that forever. A bear's not a pet. It's not a storybook. It's wild. And wild things don't understand our rules. The camera boy shifted uncomfortably, guilt etched across his face. But if I post this, people will know. They'll see what really happened. He swallowed hard. But they'll also know where it happened. Harris's eyes snapped to his. Exactly. And the last thing we need is people showing up here hoping for their own little bear story. His voice was sharp, his tone carrying weight. That cub won't survive that kind of attention. The boy looked down at his camera, suddenly seeing it not as a trophy, but as a weapon. Silence stretched again, broken only by the rustle of leaves. Finally, the girl's father asked the question on everyone's mind. So what do we do now? Harris turned toward the treeline, still watching the shadows. We leave the meadow as it is. No more food here. No more picnics here. Not until the bears have moved on. If we're lucky, they'll forget this place. The newcomers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them muttered, "But can a cub really forget something like apples?" Harris didn't answer right away. He bent down again, picking up one of the apple cores carefully, as if it were evidence. The bite marks were tiny, but deep, each one proof of curiosity turned into memory. He closed his fist around it. "No," he said finally. "She won't forget." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the meadow. The families began gathering their things with shaky hands, folding blankets, picking up plates, stuffing food back into bags with fumbling urgency. The newcomers lingered at the treeline, unwilling to cross the open space until Harris motioned them forward. As they all slowly filed out of the meadow, Harris stayed behind for a moment. He knelt again, eyes tracing the paw prints that led back to the woods. He whispered under his breath, a voice carried only by the wind. "Don't come back, little one. For your sake." Then he stood, shoulders heavy, and followed the others down the path. But even as they walked away, the meadow felt changed, charged with something unspoken. The apple patch had become more than just a picnic spot. It was a crossroads now. A place where innocence and danger had brushed against each other, leaving questions that no one wanted to answer. And deep in the woods, not far away, the cub squeaked softly as it nudged its mother's leg, eyes still wide with the memory of apples that dripped with sweetness. If the cub remembers the sweetness of apples, what will stop it from returning? And if it does, what choice will the humans make next time? For a while, the meadow lay abandoned. The trampled grass stood as silent testimony, the apple cores slowly drying and darkening under the autumn sun. But while the families avoided returning, the forest itself did not forget. Harris knew it would only be a matter of time. Days passed, then a week, and he returned to check the site with quiet dread. He came early in the morning, before the tourists stirred, when the mist still curled low across the field. The moment he stepped onto the meadow, his boots sank into damp soil, and there they were. Fresh prints. Small, rounded, unmistakable. The cub had come back. Harris crouched low, tracing the indentations with his calloused fingers. The tracks wandered near the same patch of ground where the picnickers had spread their blankets. He saw the tiny claw marks where it had pawed through the grass. It had searched. It had remembered. But the meadow was empty this time. No food, no laughter, no apples. Still, the cub had lingered. The prince doubled back, circling the clearing more than once, then disappeared into the tree line. Harris followed, his eyes sharp, his body alert. The forest was hushed except for birdsong, but he could feel it, the presence, the possibility. A low crack of a branch in the distance made him freeze. He waited, heart pounding, then moved forward again, slowly, carefully. Then he saw it. Not the cub, but the mother. She stood halfway down a slope, broad shoulders framed against the dim light, her nose lifted as she sniffed the air. Harris caught his breath. She wasn't foraging. She was waiting. Waiting for her cub to lead her to what it remembered. And that was when the weight of it struck him fully. The cub's memory wasn't harmless. It was a map. And the mother was beginning to learn it. Harris didn't move closer. He stayed hidden behind a tree, watching. After a moment, the bear huffed, turned, and melted into the brush again. Harris exhaled slowly, his hand trembling where it gripped the bark. By the time he returned to town, the decision sat heavy on his chest. He couldn't keep this to himself anymore. If word spread without control, if someone else stumbled onto the cub's return and told the wrong story, it could end badly. He found the boy with the camera sitting alone on a bench near the general store. The boy's eyes were hollow, dark crescents under them from sleepless nights. "I didn't post it," he said before Harris even spoke. His voice was flat, weary. "I almost did. My finger was on the button. But I didn't." He looked up at Harris with something like shame. "I couldn't make the cub into content. Not after that look in its eyes." Harris nodded slowly. "Good. You might have just saved its life." The boy swallowed, his throat tight. "But what now? It's not gone. Is it?" Harris sat down beside him, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "No. It came back. And it'll keep coming back until something changes." The boy stiffened. "Then, what do we do?" Before Harris could answer, the little girl's father approached, his daughter's small hand tucked safely in his. She looked up at Harris, her expression filled with a child's unshaken certainty. "She's coming back for the apples, isn't she?" Harris met her eyes. They were too wise, too clear. "Yes," he said softly. "She is." The father's jaw clenched. "Then we need to warn people. Before this gets out of hand." But Harris knew what warning people meant. It meant rangers. And rangers meant traps, relocations, or worse. The boy shook his head fiercely. "If we tell them, they'll kill her. You know they will." The father looked torn, shifting his daughter into his arms protectively. "But if we don't, and something happens?" The words hung heavy. The girl whispered she only wanted apples. Harris closed his eyes for a moment. The problem was no longer the cub alone. It was the people who would learn about her. The stories that would spread. That night, the decision haunted him. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his cabin, hearing the wind move through the trees like the low breath of something alive. In his mind, he replayed the cub circling the meadow, the mother waiting on the slope, the hungry persistence written into their survival. At dawn, he rose and packed a sack with tools, not weapons, but barriers. Rope, stakes, burlap, and a sack of bitter herbs. If he couldn't erase the cub's memory, maybe he could reshape it. He returned to the meadow, working quickly, muttering under his breath as he set up simple deterrents, since bears hated, barriers that made the open space less welcoming. Nothing that would hurt them, only discourage. But even as he worked, he knew it wasn't enough. Because somewhere in the forest, that cub was nudging its mother, squeaking softly, telling her in the only language it knew. "There's sweetness here. Follow me." Harris knows the cub's memory could lead the mother back to humans again. But if the only way to protect the bears is to keep people away, how long can he hold back the truth? It began with a sound, faint, rhythmic, almost gentle. Harris was on his porch, sipping coffee before sunrise, when he heard it, soft squeaks echoing faintly through the valley. His chest tightened. He didn't need to see her to know. The cub was calling. By the time he reached the meadow, the mist was thick, curling like smoke between the trees. The grass was still damp from the night air, glistening under the first streaks of light. Harris crouched low, scanning, waiting. And then he saw them. The cub trotted confidently into the clearing, tail flicking, nose twitching toward the remembered sweetness. And behind her, massive and steady, came the mother. Harris's heart pounded. This was no curious accident anymore. The cub had led her back. And she was trusting her little one's memory. The mother's presence was different from the cub's playful arrival weeks earlier. She moved with purpose, slow, deliberate, her massive paws pressing deep into the wet earth. Her eyes scanned the clearing, nostrils flaring, ears pricked forward. She wasn't just curious. She was evaluating. Harris whispered to himself, "She knows." The cub, oblivious to the danger of proximity, darted toward the center of the meadow, sniffing around where the picnic had once been. She pawed at the grass, squeaked softly, then looked back at her mother as if to say, "See? This is where it was." The mother lumbered forward, lowering her head to sniff. Her breath puffed visibly in the cool morning air. She snorted once, twice, then shifted her weight as if uncertain. Harris could tell she smelled the faint traces of food, the ghost of apples lingering in the soil. And then came the worst sound Harris could have imagined, voices. A group of hikers, their chatter carrying lightly across the trees. Harris froze. They weren't far, maybe a quarter-mile away, and if they kept walking, they'd enter the meadow within minutes. The mother's ears twitched. She lifted her head, staring toward the sound, her body stiffening. The cub, confused, squeaked again, circling her legs, nudging her with a tiny paw. Harris's pulse raced. If the hikers stumbled into this scene, it wouldn't end with wonder and laughter. It would end with panic and likely blood. He crept closer, staying low, whispering under his breath, "Come on, girl, take her back, don't let this happen here." But the cub wasn't ready to leave. She rolled in the grass where the picnic blanket had once lain, pawing at invisible crumbs, squeaking in delight. She picked up a dried twig and tossed it like it was another apple, chasing after it in play. The mother watched but didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on the approaching voices. The sound of laughter grew clearer. A man's chuckle. The sharp bark of a dog. Harris's blood ran cold. A dog. That could trigger disaster in seconds. He knew he had only one choice. Slowly, deliberately, he rose from behind the brush, lifting his arms. He wasn't close, still at least 40 yards away, but close enough that the bears could see him. His voice came steady, deep, carrying across the meadow. "Easy there, easy girl." The cub froze mid-play, head snapping toward him. She squeaked, startled, then bounded behind her mother's legs. The mother bear turned slowly, her massive head swiveling toward Harris. For a long, dreadful moment, their eyes met. Harris's body screamed to run, but he stood firm. His voice stayed low. "It's just me. Nothing here for you. Take her back, girl. Take her back to the trees." The mother's chest rumbled with a low, uncertain growl. Her ears flicked, indecisive. The cub poked her nose around her mother's shoulder, watching Harris with wide, curious eyes. Then the sound of the dog barked again, closer now. The mother stiffened, her whole frame taut with instinct. She huffed loudly, a warning blast that rolled like thunder through the meadow. Harris swallowed hard, heart hammering. If the hikers arrived now, they'd see a defensive mother bear. That meant danger, and likely a report that would seal the bear's fate. Harris took one slow step forward, his palms raised. "Come on, girl. This isn't your place. Not now. Not here." The cub squeaked once, almost plaintively, and nudged at her mother again as if asking for just one more chance to search. The mother growled softly in response, her head turning toward the sound of the hikers again. The dog barked a third time. And then, the breaking point. The cub bolted forward, darting back to the center of the clearing, nose down, searching desperately for apples that weren't there. The mother's roar shook the meadow, a sound of frustration and warning so powerful it made Harris's knees buckle. Birds exploded from the treetops. The hikers' voices fell silent. Harris knew they'd heard it too. The cub froze, startled, then scurried back behind her mother's bulk. The mother stood rigid, eyes blazing, her massive body a wall between the world and her cub. Harris whispered hoarsely, "Please, take her and go before they see you." For a terrible moment, time stood still. The bears and the man held each other's gaze across the misty meadow. And then, with a snort and a final, guttural huff, the mother turned. She nudged the cub hard with her muzzle, driving her toward the trees. The cub squeaked in protest but obeyed, stumbling after her mother as they melted back into the forest shadows. By the time the hikers arrived minutes later, laughing nervously about the roar they'd heard, the meadow was empty again. But Harris knew better. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The cub had proven it would keep coming back. And sooner or later, someone else would be here to see it. Someone who wouldn't understand. The mother bear finally left this time, but how many more chances will there be before humans and bears collide for real? Harris didn't sleep that night. He sat on his porch in the rocking chair, the same one his father had built decades ago, staring out at the tree-line. The mother's roar still rang in his ears, powerful and raw, the sound of wilderness brushing up against the fragile order of human life. The cub's persistence had become a pattern. She had tasted human food once, apples, nothing more, but enough to carve a memory deep into her small mind. Now every time hunger pressed against her ribs, the meadow called to her. And with her, the mother came too. Harris understood what that meant. It was only a matter of time before someone less patient than him, a rancher with livestock, a hiker with fear in their eyes, or worse, a state ranger with orders, would decide the bears were too close. And he couldn't let that happen. By sunrise, Harris had already packed. Not weapons, not traps. Just a single burlap sack filled with apples he had picked himself from the orchard behind his cabin. Each one gleamed red in the early light, smelling sweet, crisp, alive. He walked toward the meadow slowly, deliberately, the weight of the sack pulling at his shoulder. When he reached the clearing, the mist was just beginning to burn away. He set the apples down gently in the grass, then stepped back, far back, until he was nothing but a still figure at the edge of the woods. Minutes passed. The air was heavy with silence. Then, movement. The cub appeared first, nose to the ground, paws pattering quickly over the earth. She squeaked with joy when she spotted the apples, rushing forward with no hesitation. She grabbed one, biting into it with a loud crunch that seemed to echo across the valley. And then the mother emerged. She paused at the tree-line, her dark form enormous against the thinning fog. Her head lowered, nostrils flaring, eyes scanning the clearing. She spotted Harris almost immediately. For a long moment, the two just watched each other. Harris didn't move. His breath stayed slow, his hands visible at his sides. The cub squeaked again, rolling the apple in her mouth before darting to grab another. She pawed at the sack, tugging until a second apple tumbled free. The sound made the mother turn her head. Slowly, she stepped into the clearing. Harris swallowed. His heart thudded painfully. He whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear, "This is it. This is your chance." The mother lowered her head and sniffed the apples. She didn't eat. She only nudged one with her nose, then looked back toward Harris. Her breath puffed in heavy clouds. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't fear. It was a warning and a test. The cub squeaked impatiently, tugging at the apple between her paws, crunching happily. The mother stayed still, watching Harris with eyes that seemed to ask, "What do you want from us?" Harris slowly lifted one hand and pointed back toward the trees. His voice cracked but came steady enough, "Take her back. Take her home. Don't let her come here again." The mother blinked, then gave a deep huff. She nudged the cub with her massive head, pushing her away from the apples. The cub squeaked in protest, wriggling against her mother's strength, but the push was firm, unyielding. Step by step, the mother drove her back toward the forest edge. The cub glanced back repeatedly, squeaking as if pleading for one more apple. But the mother never wavered. She led her daughter into the shadows of the trees, the sound of crunching fading with each reluctant step. Harris stood frozen long after they were gone. His chest ached, not from fear but from something heavier. Relief, yes. Sadness, too. And hope, fragile, flickering hope, that maybe this would be enough. Days turned to weeks. The meadow stayed quiet. The cub never returned. Some nights Harris thought he heard faint squeaks echoing through the forest, but they were always distant, muffled by trees. The hikers who had once passed through laughed about that one morning with the roar, never realizing how close they'd come. The locals spoke of the bears in hushed tones but never saw them again near the orchards or the meadows. And Harris? He planted a new row of apple trees by the edge of his land. Not for himself, but for them. He never left another sack in the meadow. That was too close, too dangerous. But he hoped the scent would drift into the wild, pulling the cub's memory away from human picnics and back into the woods where it belonged. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves turned fire-red and gold, Harris walked to the orchard with a basket. He picked an apple, its skin smooth and cool, and sat on the porch as the sun dipped low. He thought of the cub, of her small paws clutching the apple, of her squeaks of delight, of the way she had trusted the world to be kind. And he whispered into the fading light, "Grow strong, little one. Remember the trees, not the meadow." The breeze stirred, carrying the scent of apples into the darkening forest. And somewhere, deep among the trees, a faint squeak answered. The cub never returned to the picnic grounds again. She grew into the forest the way she was meant to, guided by her mother, and remembered by the man who had chosen patience over fear. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us: the wild doesn't always need taming. Sometimes, it only needs space.